Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another League video. I hope you guys all enjoy. As per usual, if you guys are new to this series, we do it for LEC, which started, of course, a week earlier, and now with LCS, every single week, breaking down and giving awards for this past weekend's gameplay. This, of course, being week one. Let's keep in note, everything is very preliminary, but this weekend did show us a lot of things. On top of that, every Monday, we actually cover top highlights on this channel, so if you guys want to check that out, and every Tuesday, I break it down, give out the awards, and give you a quick summary of what we saw this past weekend. But again, like I said before, it was quite peculiar. We saw a lot of different things this weekend, and I think, in my opinion, projected wise, we saw a lot of the top half teams playing top half teams, a lot of bottom half teams projection wise playing bottom half teams. So I was not surprised to see the standings come out a bit mixed up this past weekend. A quick summary as well. The first thing I do want to touch on is the reason why OpTic Gaming played with their academy roster, or majority of it based around Crown. It was actually Zabuteen coming out, as well as the casting crew did tell all of us guys. It was actually Arrow who cannot play for that roster. They knew that going into that, so they built around Crown, they built around Asta, communication wise, synergy wise. That's why they had majority of the academy roster. They felt a lot of those guys performed better around Asta than the remaining roster, so they stuck out with their academy roster the entire weekend. Of course, they went 1-1. I would say a pretty borderline lucky success here, because if this did go awry, if they did go 0-2, I think they should be considered pretty lucky to get that first win of the split so far. If it did go 0-2, I think we see a lot more backlash for this move, and again, though, we don't know the particular reasons as to why they chose that besides synergy and communication. Of course, they could have stuck with a different roster, skill-wise being better, but communication-wise, they felt it was more important to have 5 players who communicate better than actually play better. Either way, it did work out a borderline success for OpTic Gaming this past weekend. Alongside them, I'd say a decent surprise was actually FlyQuest, but I think, of course, with that OpTic Academy roster, not so surprising. I will say, though, FlyQuest, if they can get JJ to not throw early game, actually a pretty clean weekend for those guys. Of course, FlyQuest going 2-0, Team Liquid going 2-0. They'll be talked about much during this episode. And 100 Thieves, again, a team that many people out there enjoy hating on, having a weekend that people love to see them have for some odd reason, myself not being one of those people, as they go 0-2. But let's break it down, guys. Let's get into awards out there. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to start off these episodes like you guys probably expected to. Liquid has to be your most impressive team. ELO standings as well as rankings, guys, they are your #1 team in North America so far, and they very well should be. Although I will say it was a bit of a back and forth game between them and Cloud9 in terms of team fights. I will say Sven's engagement really threw me off for a whirl. I'm not a big fan of the new pick. I don't think that was the issue here, though. I think it was his engagements. Of course, when you had Liquid in that matchup, their composition was a very powerful close range damage comp, and it was Sven seemingly jumping in. I'm not sure if it was communicated very poorly or if there was some other lost thing in translation there. It seemed he would engage before their comp, that being Cloud9, could poke any damage down. He would engage, he would die, and then it's Cloud9 retreating in a 4v5. I would say not a very clean game from Cloud9. Liquid take it nonetheless, and they win the crucial fights, showcasing their ability to do so. And against CLG, one of the cleanest games we saw all weekend long. Triple Inferno very early on. Alongside that, I think Core JJ really showcasing himself as the powerful player that Doublelift also proclaims him to be. That duo is going to be very tough to deal with, and I think a CLG roster, alongside them, teams like Golden Guardians, a lot of teams who did not start out with the best records, I think surprising teams will rise this split. I think CLG might be one of them. They had a series of kind of unfortunate events, but 2 semi-strong victories for Liquid, guys, and very convincing against CLG, certainly lands them team of the week. And I think Doublelift says it best as well. We have not seen much of Team Liquid yet, but what we have seen from Core JJ alongside the remainder of this roster, it is very powerful, and of course them taking away Cloud9's best player. I'll show you guys a clip from Doublelift himself. He thinks this is the best roster Liquid has yet to have.
And I think we upgraded, so hopefully we're even better. Like, that's the plan, to be even better. I think a lot of the teams got weakened as well, like C9, so that was really important, taking away their best player. So it's like, it's pretty hard to top what we've already done, but, you know, I have my sights set on Worlds and MSI, but obviously we have to win here first.
Well, let's talk about one of your upgrades. Core JJ coming in the bot lane, former world champion. Is he meeting your expectations for a support?
Yeah, Core is actually way better than I expected, and I already expected a lot, so definitely the best lane partner I've ever had. Sorry to all my former lane partners, but He's insane.
And following off that, like you guys will see if you watch our LEC videos as well, usually the MVP of the week, that being individual player, follows the best team of the week. It has to be, though. I'll be choosing a couple picks, you know, to avoid controversy out there, avoid you guys getting too mad at me. Feel free to leave comments down below. What I like the most is when people comment their MVPs, their best team of the week. That way we can kind of compare back and forth. When it comes to MVP players, though, I'll usually choose 2 or 3 to try and actually side with many of you guys out there as opposed to a select few. So first of all, my secondary choice has to be Sven. Now, I'm going to say as well, against Piglet, that being from Clutch Gaming, he got outclassed immediately. But their first game for TSM, guys, I think that he showed himself to meet amazing Ezreal once he actually feeds a champion. Of course, he was on Kai'Sa against CG. I was not too impressed by that, but TSM in their first showing, I was extremely impressed by. I think they win this game no matter what, but with the help of Sven, his poke damage, 7-1 Ezreal, and just feeding up himself, his true shot barrage, either in fights or out of fights, the damage he did, I would love to see a stat on that. Of course, I could have, you know, looked it up by now, but either way, guys, TSM, that being Sven, I think deserves a secondary MVP of the week just for his poke damage. I'm excited to see if this guy can feed other champs, how deep his hero pool is or his champ pool is, and definitely a huge performance out of him. I think TSM secured the at least one victory no matter what, but it was a standout player in my eyes. The number 1 MVP, though, in my eyes, goes to that being CoreJJ. Talked to him, of course, Doublelift saying he is one of the best players he's ever played alongside with, and the thing that actually impressed me the most this past weekend was his kill participation, especially against CLG. This man was involved with just about every single fight besides the game-ending fight, and it was great to see because throughout this weekend, we saw a couple matchups where support players were not there for heavy engages, but that was something that CoreJJ did just stellarly, an amazing job of doing. He was always involved, whether he was needed or not. He did not take a second chance. He did not take an off chance and said his team had control of it. He was always there when the team needed him, and he showcased that very well against CLG, but I think in both their matchups, and that's why he is this week's MVP. And for play of the week at NA LCS, well, there was not too many flashy surprises this week. To be honest, individual play, when I go for play of the week, I go for individual plays. There was not too many heavy-hitting killers out there. You know, we had a couple 6 or 7 kill games for a few players out there, but they were generally spread out throughout the game. Not a lot of double kills. I'm not really sure of any triple kills either. I will choose a couple players here, though, that actually in the early game, as well as one in the late game, that being Licorice, might have changed the game. Now, usually for play of the game, it has to be a pretty substantial change, but both of these actually ended in losses, unfortunately enough, but they were what I saw as that what could have been key plays if the game was actually continued in that direction. So first of all, I'm going to go Cloud9 Licorice, guys, a late game double kill. Unfortunately enough, just not enough against Team Liquid, although it could have been the change if there was a follow-up. It was, of course, in the enemy jungle. It wasn't too much follow-up available, but it was a double kill by Licorice, guys, which I think was still a worthy play.
Okay, the battle continues. CoreJJ gonna get a knock-up and get knocked right back in. He does not have flash. This should be a kill, and he's gonna get the ult. He's gonna get a solo kill on the support. Licorice has welcomed to NA again.
Doublelift is looking to change it, but he might.
He's gonna find an Urgot, getting knocked around a little bit, but this could still be a good fight for the squad. TL has reinforcements
No
coming.
ult, but he has red.
Licorice has a red. He gets the attack. 2 more shots will get it. Can he make this kill happen? One more takes him down.
And also second was a guy that I thought maybe was deserving of a potential MVP if they came out with a win in this, and of course maybe a 2-0 start as well. That being TSM with their, I guess you could say, mid to late game throw against Clutch Gaming. It's actually BrokenBlade. I think him alongside Acadian early game in lane phase actually showed themselves with opening picks to be very, very aggressive, but on top of that, just very pristine. I think BrokenBlade had a very solid weekend and a very solid showing. If TSM close out this game, this is certainly probably an MVP candidate, that being BrokenBlade, but I'll show you guys his 2 separate solo kills as well as his help from Acadian.
So BrokenBlade played that one quite well.
He's sticking around. He wants to get in with this.
Size rush, one dark
might kill him here. It's gonna be a
chain
solo.
comes out, throws down the world under. He can get the kill on Hootie, but he gets stopped up. One more darkened blade to come in, but he uses the up roll. Definitely dish out the damage. Acadian in his back pocket here as they think they play the call on Lyra being in the back pocket as well. Hootie goes down before they can even blink. Lyra wants to try the counter kill. Dragon's Rage out, but it's gonna be mixed up in the minions, and baby, that's a double kill. Blade
Helping out there, but look at this, another one. Is this another one?
No way, Darkened Blade hits Darkened Blade, third strike takes him down.
And the one category I don't really enjoy doing too much because it makes me feel bad. I feel like every episode I gotta preface, I have no hate for these guys, but based off expectations, of course, I'm gonna have a lot of underwhelming players because I hold these players so highly. When they misperform, I have to maybe call them out for it and hope they just get better, and which I do see potential for these players. The first of which, I actually had 2 candidates. I was going to choose Sven for this role strictly because of his game against Liquid. The amount of times this guy engaged, like I said previously, well, it seemed to be miscommunicated, right? We talked about the concurring comps there, his miscommunicated or untimely dives, which often ended in his own death, and no follow-up from his team. But I went with the better pick in my opinion, which would be Ole. I think Ole throughout the entire weekend had a loss of confidence, and again, I think a fan favorite for people to really pick on as a falling off character ever since 2017, has really dismantled himself ever since the Team Liquid era, but still a guy I see very high expectations for and expect a lot out of, and that's why I chose him this weekend. I just saw a dismantlement, a snowball effect of a character, an 0-4 Morgana, an 0-6 Rakan, and I think, yes, in that second matchup, Rakan to Leona, obviously not your favorite matchup, but that was not the case. I think, honestly, in both games, he found himself in positions where he was trying to outdo himself. He was trying to double down and get his team to crawl back out of it, and in doing so, often led to his own death and actually crawled back in the opposite direction and crawled his team further into a hole. I think Ole really mistimed his engagements. He often dove way too deep, and that was certainly, in my own opinion, an underwhelming character and player of this past weekend. And very lastly, this might make some of you happy. It certainly does not make me happy. The most underwhelming team of the week has to be, in my personal opinion, 100 Thieves, based off expectations. Certainly, in most people's book, probably a top 4 team, and some even a top 3 team based off pure skill on paper. It would make sense. Certainly a team I think many of us still believe will be a playoff contending team, and I personally believe it for sure. They just need to showcase their talent. And certainly, you could also argue the teams they lost to this week being TSM and Cloud9, arguably 2 other top 4 or top 5 teams, and certainly also playoff contending teams. Like I said previously, a lot of top teams playing top teams, a lot of bottom teams playing bottom teams. This was one of the most kind of unfortunate matchups as well for a week 1 team trying to figure things out. Of course, we do know the synergy of these guys. I believe in it if we can possibly see it. There were a lot of 4v5 engagements here from 100 Thieves, almost forced into because they fell so far behind in laning phase. We weren't able to really showcase an even fight most of the time, right? A lot of those lanes were falling behind. We could not showcase Bang and his firepower. I'm excited to see what this team can do when they engage in 5v5 fights and even ground or even with a gold lead. This team has potential. Certainly, if they work on that laning phase, we never got to see the 100 Thieves I think we expected to see throughout week 1. We all know Aframu, his synergy with Huni. A lot of the people out there thinking he pretty much directly signed this guy. Management saying, well, kinda, but still, I believe in this roster on paper. Once they get showcased, right? Once they figure out those laning phases, this team, when evenly placed on the map against any other team, certainly has the upper edge or the upper hand when it comes to these matchups. If we can see a 5v5 and equal footing for this team, I believe in them. But this week, certainly based off expectations, not many people seeing these guys going 0-2 first starts, and they are my most underwhelming team this week. But as always, I hope you guys all enjoy week 1 of the NA LCS breakdown. My name is Jake. If you guys have a different opinion, leave it down below. I'd love to see what you guys have to say, and I'll see you back here next week breaking down week 2 as things are certainly getting pretty spicy. But as always, I hope you guys all enjoy, and I'll see you next time.